Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Inside the Mirror podcast. I'm Kyle David, your host. Today, I have a super exciting guest. This is somebody that I've interacted with for a little while now. And the guy wears many hats. He's an entrepreneur. He's an artist manager. He runs several businesses. I know he's got a lot more on his plate, but just to name a few things that the guy does. Today, I have Nick, the manager, on the podcast. Nick, welcome, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. It's funny. I couldn't stop laughing when you said I wear many hats because we got the same hat. It's
We're
crazy.
literally wearing the same beanie. So if you're listening right now, you got to tune in on YouTube. We are wearing the exact same hat.
Yeah.
Wild. Look, the universe does weird things. Nick, let's just dive in, bro. Like, tell me, just give us the 4, 5, 6 minute background overview, origin story of who you are.
Okay. Yeah. But first thing, anyone listening, if you haven't gotten one of Kyle's masks, you got to get them. I know they're
Hey.
starting to lift restrictions a lot of places, but your mask that you sent me, I've worn the entire pandemic. I got to tell you, I haven't worn any other mask because they're so comfortable and they say be kind, which is like my whole thing. And I just had to thank you for doing that because otherwise I don't know what I'd be doing.
Yeah, man, thank you.
Yeah. So, anyways, Nick the manager. It's kind of a funny name. I'm Nick Jorgensen. I go by Nick the manager on social media, just because it's kind of a catchy handle and it represents my main focus, which is artist management. So I started in all of this kind of by accident. It was 2015. I had graduated from college here in Arizona. And I got this software job. And I was working at the cubicles and I kind of realized that, that fucking sucks. I don't want to be in a cubicle all day. That's not my life. And I always imagined that I'd be doing more and be entrepreneurial. And I always loved music. At that point, I had written songs for a few years, and just because I loved hip hop, I'd listen to Lil Wayne, listen to Eminem, kind of write my own songs, but was never taking it too seriously. And then the way that I got my foot in the door for the music industry was through my Spotify playlist. So back a few years prior to that, my cousin randomly said, "Bro, you got to get Spotify." And it was kind of a new thing back then. He said, "It's going to change your life." So I was like,
What year
"Okay."
was it? Do you remember?
I want to say 2013, maybe somewhere
Okay.
around there. I remember I was in college, and what it was I was using my iPod Nano at the gym. I had the thing you download the songs on the internet, you put on your
Classic.
playlist. So all I did was I transferred the songs on my iPod Nano onto a Spotify playlist called "Lifting Heavy Ass Weights."
Mm-hmm.
And that was my playlist. It's still my gym playlist for the last 8 years. And what happened was, I guess because of the unique name, lifting and heavy ass weights, it was kind of catchy. It started to gain traction. And I wasn't following it at the time, but I was just using it. And then one day I noticed there's a number on it and it said I had like 1,000 followers. I was like, oh, that's neat. And back then nobody really understood how playlists work. But I saw that and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I can't like interact with them. It's not like I have 1,000 Instagram followers or something.
Right.
So I didn't really pay much attention to it. And then another year or two went by, and all of a sudden, this guy messaged me out of the blue, and he wanted to buy my playlist. I remember I was at the gym with my friend George. We were taking a yoga class, and right before the yoga class started, I showed him this message. He's like, "Dude, that's $100. Take the money, sell the playlist." And for me, I was like, "Nah, I still use that playlist. It's what I work out to." And he wanted me
Yeah.
to like remove all my songs and put all his songs. So that was the first time I saw that it had some value.
Yeah.
Um, and then I said no to that, and then I started getting more and more people reach out to me, whether it be artists, managers. Eventually Universal Music contacted me because they
Wow.
had a streaming department, and so they not contracted me, but they brought me in as someone to review their music. So like when Drake dropped or whoever dropped, they would send me songs and I would get
Dope.
paid just to listen to them, which was cool. It was the dream,
That's
right?
amazing.
Yeah. It
What a
wasn't a lot of
gig.
money, but it was a couple bucks, per song. And obviously the goal was they wanted me to add the songs and help their artists, do well. So that's how I started. I was reviewing music for Universal. Other people were sending me music to try and get on the playlist. And this is when we started to discover that Spotify playlists in the streaming era were becoming the new radio stations. So,
Mm,
like prior to that, the only way to get mass exposure was to be on a platform like a radio station, where even if nobody likes your music, if you get played on the radio, they have a guaranteed fan base that's going to hear it. And the same thing with playlists. So I was getting all these random messages, and one of the random messages was from Oren Major. He was the first artist that I ever started working with. He messaged me on Facebook one day, and at this time, I was getting so many messages, like at least 10 per day, and I was
mm.
just overwhelmed. So I actually didn't respond to his first message, uh, but luckily he followed up, and I said, "Hey, what's up, man? I listened to some of his music, and I didn't like the songs that he sent me to add to my playlist, but I listened to
Mm,
his whole catalog because I
mm,
heard something. I was like, this guy's special. He's talented. I really liked his music, and he had 12 listeners or something crazy." And I started helping him just because I love the music, and I was like,
mm,
he deserves way more exposure, because at that point I had seen all these terrible artists who are getting way more listeners, in by working in playlists. So I added one of his songs, Spice, from his debut album to my playlist, and then all of a sudden, within a month, it was spiking.
mm,
So what we did, the way I look at it now is that we broke the threshold. So the song had
mm,
been out for a few months, but by adding it to my playlist, it started to get exposure. It got
mm,
over 1,000 streams, and then Spotify was able to look at it and add it to their algorithmic playlist.
mhm,
So next thing we know, every Monday it was hitting Discover Weekly. So the
mm.
first week it hit like 1,000 listeners, and then the next week was 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. Next thing we know, within 2 months, maybe we had a day where we had 14,000 listeners. And we're like, holy shit, that's the key to
This is
this.
working.
This is what we do. So we had been pushing his music, talking to each other for, a couple months at that time.
Mhm,
And I had sent his music video to this Facebook page called Born Famous to try and get some exposure there.
mhm.
He said he liked it, he posted it, and then the guy he asked me, "How do you know Oren?" And I was like, "That's a good question." So I asked Oren, I'm like, "What would you describe it?" And he said, "Dude, I've been telling you you should be my manager." And I'm like,
Boom.
what is a manager?
Uh,
Because at that point I had no idea what an artist manager was, and most people still don't. I think if you're not in the
sure.
industry, like when I tell people what I do, they're like, "You're a producer? Like what do you like, DJ Khaled?" Like, no, nothing like that.
Just like sell the merch.
Yeah. So he asked me to be his manager. I said yes. And then I figured it out. I started Googling, like, what is an artist manager? What does an artist manager
Mm,
do?
mm.
I Googled the cheapest entertainment lawyers I could find. I set up an LLC. We drafted a management agreement. We negotiated back and forth for a couple of months, and then July 2017 we officially signed. And since then, I've done all kinds of different things, but mainly working with Oren, to where he's had over 11 million streams. We went on a national headline tour last year. He just got his song placed on the Netflix show Love, Death, and Robots in the
I
opening
saw
scene.
that. Congratulations, man.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah, dude, that's huge.
it was crazy. I mean, it got like 30,000 Shazams in the first week. So yeah, we've had a lot of big wins, but it all came from just a random Facebook message because I had a playlist.
Huh. That just shows you the power of social media and networking, man, right?
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. He was long distance. I mean, it was
Right.
Atlanta to Arizona for several years.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now, uh, thanks for that intro. Like, and we'll get more into Oren here in a minute. Like, as far as like, it's something that I've seen from you, and I think you're big on, and you even touched on it there, is like the power of just being able to use the internet to learn how to do things, right? Like,
Right.
you even said it right there. You didn't know what an artist manager was. You didn't know what to do. Like, I don't even know what this is, but you immediately just went and found and learned. Like,
Mhm.
what would you say on that topic of like, when you don't know things, whether you're an artist or just a business person or just a creative in general, a lot of people I think get stuck and go, oh, I don't know how to do that, or I could never do that, or, all those
Right.
things, kind of self-skepticism. What would you say to that as somebody that just takes action? Like, is that something that's innately in you? Where did that come from? And like, how have you learned from that
Yeah.
process?
So yeah, there's a lot there. And that's a really good question. you have to try and figure things out. If
Mhm.
you're going to be an entrepreneur, there's always going to be things that you don't know how to do. You don't know what it is. So like when we started out, not only did I not know what a manager was, but I obviously didn't have any experience. I didn't have any connections. We didn't have any money to spend.
Sure.
It was all about like, how do we figure this out and how do we become successful with just the resources we have around us? So,
Mhm.
um, like you kind of said in the intro, I've done a lot of different things, but it was just because I wanted to try things. And for me, I just like trying things. If it
Mm.
excites me in any way, I'm going to try it.
Mm.
And I think everyone should do that. And even if you don't necessarily become successful at it, you at least have learned about it. So like a common example would be artists not mixing their own music.
Mm.
That's totally okay. But I think every artist should at least try it to kind of learn what it's about, what kind of work goes into it. And then at that point, you'll have the ability to communicate with mix engineers to say exactly what you want. And you can
Mm.
understand when they've put the work in and when they haven't, just
Mhm.
because you've at least tried it.
Mm.
So for me, it's always been about trying things. And, I'm sitting in the studio that I built myself. I had never built
Yeah.
anything before this.
It's
Um,
crazy,
it
man.
was terrifying. I mean, the first night after I bought the house, I tore up the carpet and I'm like, okay, just destroyed my property value immediately. you know. And then it was actually my dad came to visit for a week because he lives in Japan, but he was
Mm.
here. And when I was at work one day, he sent me a picture and there was a hole in the drywall because I told him I wanted to build the studio and he just
Uh-huh.
started for me. So shout out to
Nice.
him. So the
Shout out to Nick's dad.
next thing we know, all the walls are down. And then I tore down the ceiling, the floor is all gone, and just built it out from scratch, totally soundproof, insulated, and then treated the inside. And it was a long year. I mean, it was one weekend at a
Sure.
time. All my spare time was Googling. I was still
Mhm.
managing Oren, doing all the other stuff, but
Mhm.
every chance I got, I was Googling, like, how do I make it soundproof perfectly? Like, what
Mhm.
kind of clips do I need? What kind of mass loaded vinyl? What kind of insulation? And just Googling it and then trying things. And you run into all of these problems that you can't possibly imagine. But once you start trying it, you run into the problems, you figure it out, you overcome them, and you become a different person, honestly, after that.
Mm. And you'd never done, like, you had no construction
I
experience,
had to
no
buy
background in
tools.
it. You had to buy tools.
Yeah.
So you started from absolute zero.
Yeah. I had
Bro,
to rent a
that what a
truck every
testament,
time.
man. That's such a
Yeah.
testament to just hard work and persistence, man.
Thank you. And
Kudos to
then
you.
obviously the best part about it was that it paid off. Not only was Oren
Mhm.
able to use the studio to make an album, I'm able to use it for my streaming, my podcast, but we got
Mhm.
Jack Harlow in here, just
Saw
because I
that.
had built the studio.
Right. And so are you still running that, like, as what did it become? Because it's not just a studio, right? You almost have like a rap house there, right?
Exactly. So that's the name of it.
Yeah,
It's
talk about
called
that.
yeah, it's called Rap House Phoenix.
Uh-huh.
So what happened was 2017, after I'd started working with Oren, my apartment lease was coming up, and I was thinking like, maybe I don't renew it. Maybe I look at houses. I had never
Mhm.
wanted to get a house or a mortgage or be tied down anywhere.
Sure.
But I was thinking about Oren. I'm like, if we can get you a studio where you can
Mhm.
just be free to make music for free, that could really benefit us. And so the idea was I was going to buy a house where he could live in it, my roommate could live in it, another friend I have who makes music could live in it, and then there'd be an extra room for the studio.
Mhm.
So that's how I sized this house to be a 5 bedroom house. I bought it. it I think I was in the house within 45 days of when I had that conversation with Oren, and then the first
Wow.
night I was tearing up the bedroom. So I bought the house for that reason, and of course nobody moved in for various reasons. So
Man.
I was in this big house by myself,
Uh-huh.
and I had to. So I was building the studio throughout all of 2018, one weekend at a time because I still had a full time job, one paycheck at a time to pay for all the supplies because it's crazy expensive.
Mhm.
And then when I was finished, because no one moved in, I decided to run it as a regular studio.
Mhm.
So I had live in engineers who would operate this studio and then some of the other bedrooms as studios. But all of that was really taxing on me.
Sure.
I had to go to work. It was a lot of stress for not very much money. So
Sure.
eventually I kind of kicked kicked everyone out. I had one engineer on standby, and then I started looking for people on tour. I just had this idea, like, you
Mm,
know, maybe we could get people to come stay here. If I offer it for free, you know, maybe, you know, because the tour road is hard. You know, you're
mhm.
sleeping in a bus or you're not showering, you're not getting home cooked food. So what I created was a free lodging for a free lodging for touring artists where they could use the studio, make music, take showers. I think we had like 14 beds. You know, it was a
Dang.
place, it was a sanctuary essentially.
Sure.
And so the first person we ended up getting in here was Earl Sweatshirt. Um,
Hey.
and the process by all of that happening was literally just Googling what venues are near me, what
Mhm.
shows are on those calendars, and then
Hmm.
who might come stay here and how do I get in
Hmm.
contact with them. So that was
Right.
all Googling. Who is Earl Sweatshirt's manager? Who is Earl Sweatshirt's tour manager? Finding emails. And I ended up getting in touch with Layla Steinberg, who was his manager, and who was actually the first manager of Tupac, which
Really?
I didn't know about. Yeah.
That's wild.
And so Layla, I sent her the idea. She said, okay, it's interesting. And then the night before they were coming to town, I got a call out of the blue. And she's like, hey, it's Layla. I was like, Layla. Oh, shit. Hey, how's it going? um, and so we had a conversation, and I guess she liked my energy and like what I was trying to do. And she vouched for me.
Uh-huh.
She essentially said, you know, I'm gonna have these people come, my family, come stay with you, a stranger. So don't
Uh-huh.
tell them that we don't know each other.
Uh-huh.
So she pretty much lied and stuck her neck out for me just to make this happen,
Wow.
um, off the strength of a phone call and me just reaching out. And so that night or the next night, Earl Sweatshirt shows up at the door, and I'm
That's
like,
crazy.
"What's going on, bro?" You know, and it was really just surreal. But after we got that first one, we had the credibility of, okay, famous people can stay here. It's not weird. These aren't weird people. Um,
Mhm.
and so after that, they all just kind of started rolling in.
Mhm.
And let's see, I think next we had like Chris Webby, Mark
Mm.
Battles, Locksmith, Greaves, Fat Boy, Ari Lennox. She didn't actually stay here, but they were on tour here. All
Mhm.
kinds of different people came through, with the Jack Harlow being the last one before
Sure.
the
And
pandemic.
probably the biggest one, right? I mean, one of the
Yeah.
biggest for sure.
After that, I mean, he hit
Guy's gone nutso.
#1 rap caviar. Like he's as big as they get now. Yeah.
Was he how was he? Like just being curious. Was
Oh,
he a cool dude?
yeah, so that's kind of what I learned. The most successful people I've met are very down to earth. So
Huh.
like Jack Harlow, he was really cool. I was
Uh-huh.
hosting them. They were here for a couple nights, I think. And I remember they brought back like some groupies or whatever after the show, and they
Uh-huh.
were all playing this game called Spoons in the living room. And he comes out and he asked me to come join them and like partake in the partying. And then
Nice.
yeah, he's just a very, very kind guy. And when we were setting up his bedroom upstairs when he first got here, he was asking me like, "So you manage artists?" They said, like, "Who do you manage?" Like, "Oh, Oren Major." And so we had a conversation about that.
Nice.
And then Oren called me and we were FaceTiming, and I put him on the phone with Jack, and so they got to talk. And just very down to earth guy. Yeah.
Bro, it's very interesting to me that it seems like you're this empire that you have, or this small empire you're building.
Yeah.
I mean, I call it an empire, man. Like it's almost like everything has just been built off of straight like grit and just networking and personality, right? Just like people, no crazy skills. Like you said, you didn't come at it with all these this backing. Your family wasn't like in the music industry
No.
or like nothing, just grit. And but also, and something that I want to commend you on, man, is you give a lot of value. Like you actually just want to help people. Like it's
Right.
very obvious that you're not just like, oh man, what can we do for ourselves? Me and Oren are just going to take.
Yeah.
You're just giving constantly, man. And if anybody's listening or watching, you follow Nick, you know, like you're constantly just like helping people. Like, is that like is that just something innately in you? You just care about
Yeah.
people? It's
um,
rare. That's why I ask, because you see a full world of and the internet of everybody grabbing and seeing what they can get from people, and somebody like you that actually doesn't have to help a lot of people, right? You're in a good position, but you still reach back and you respond to DMs from small artists and you post things that you're helping people with. It's just really encouraging to me to see somebody just being so kind, man.
Yeah, so I got to preface that with, you know, I'm very fortunate to be in a very good position to where I can help people. So like, I grew up overseas on a military base, and my parents
Mm,
were able to send me here to go to college. And I was able to get a good job to where, I am in a good place. So a
mm,
lot of people don't have that. But I am very fortunate. That
mm,
aside, I do truly love helping people. Like that
mm,
is the best feeling for me. And that's why I've gone so hard,
mm.
because what I learned recently, because me and Oren had kind of a falling out during the pandemic. We're back together now and everything's good. But
Good.
what I realized was that the reason I was going so hard was because I wanted to get Oren to a better life. I
Uh,
wanted him to be successful. It wasn't for me.
uh,
Because if it's just for me, I'm pretty happy. I have a good life, I have a good job, I have my studio, I can do my podcast thing. There's not a whole lot else I need in my life, but the
mm,
reason I work so hard is to try to help other people.
mm,
Um, Particularly Oren, trying to get him where he deserves to be, because
mm,
he's had less fortunate circumstances. And then, with the community, that's why I have a community, because for
mhm,
4 years I've been putting out information for free, where I sold a guide. So I had a guide called Spotify for Dummies that
mhm,
I'm selling now for $50, I think, including a bunch of other stuff. But it started off as an email. Someone had
mhm,
emailed me like, "Hey man, how'd you do so well on Spotify?" And so I wrote him back this long email. And then after I sent it to him, I started posting on Instagram like, "Hey, who else wants to read this?" And so I had
mhm,
ended up sending like 400 or 500 emails just personally for free, to try to help people. And then it wasn't until people started asking me questions after I had sent them the guide saying, "Hey man, so how do I do this?" I'm like, "Did you read the guide that I sent you?" And they're like, "Nah, I didn't get around to it." I'm like, "Well, fuck that. I'm not going
I
to
gave
waste
you
my
all the
time."
answers.
Yeah. So that's when I started listing it for sale, just because I didn't want to do the whole back and forth. What's your email? Let me type it out.
Mm,
And so then I started selling it. And of course, the income all goes back into this. All every
sure.
dollar I make, it was for, you know, helping Oren or putting it into the tour or building the studio. All that money just goes right back into it.
Mhm,
And it's not about trying to make money and take advantage of artists. It's just, if
mhm,
you can afford $5, $10, whatever you can, that
mhm,
helps me. And the more successful I become, the more resources I have to help other people.
mhm.
Um, and so that's kind of the basis of the Patreon community, which I started during the pandemic. So actually, I know I'm on a tangent, but let's go back a
Keep
little.
going.
Yeah. So let's see, 2018 or 2019,
Mhm.
2020 maybe. Sorry. So
It's
2020,
all
I
a blur.
started.
The pandemic blurred everything,
Dude,
bro.
it really is. Um, so after I had sold the guides, I had sold like 500 copies or something.
Mm,
Cato, the producer, he was in
mm,
town for his sound advice tour. And what that is he would have small gatherings of artists and producers. They would ask him questions. He'd give music feedback, all kinds of stuff like that. And so when I saw he was coming to Arizona, I was doing the Rap House thing, and I
mm,
reached out to him saying, "Hey man, would you like to come do it at Rap House?" And so he had already picked a different studio, but he said, "You know what? Why don't you come and be a special guest at the event?" And so he invited me.
dope.
Yeah, I was like, "That's so dope. I'm a special guest."
Super dope.
So I went to his event, and I sat in the back and I watched everything.
Uh-huh.
And afterwards, I talked to him, got to meet him a little bit. But what I learned was that, no disrespect to him, but I could teach a class very similar and actually
Mhm,
provide more value, because what me and Oren were doing was much more relevant to the people in the room. So
mhm,
like for Cato, he had become successful years earlier prior to
sure.
streaming. He's very successful now. He's catching a lot
Mhm,
of the TikTok stuff, and not to say he's not successful, but he came up in an era with CDs and all that.
mhm.
Whereas
Old
me and
school.
Oren, exactly. So me and Oren were more geared to the new school, and we are having success now.
Mhm,
So I took that, I learned from his class, and I think the next weekend I held my first class. I
mm,
said, "Hey, who wants to come?" I'm gonna call it artist by profession, because you want to
mhm.
become an artist as your profession. And we sold out in like, I don't know, 4 hours or something. And so
Crazy.
I set it up in my living room, and it was such a weird feeling, because I'm an introvert, and I'm not
Mhm,
really good at or wasn't very good at talking to people or talking in front of people. I have stage fright and all that, and so I had to kind of step up and be Nick the manager so that these people could learn from me. And so all these people had paid to come, and I put on the class, and it went so well that I ended up doing 12 more of those.
Yeah, I
So I
saw
did.
that. And you toured the country with it, right?
Right. So, a lot of people don't know this, but my tour was essentially a way to pay for Oren's tour. So he
Oh,
had booked a
huh,
bunch of shows, and all I did was offer classes in those cities the night
huh.
before. So we would stay
Smart.
there. I
Super
would,
smart.
right. So not only did it bring in ticket revenue from my classes to pay for the transportation and the Airbnb and stuff, but it
Mhm.
also brought in people who would get to know Oren and then come to the show. And then it was also
Right.
how we found a lot of our openers
So
for the
smart.
show who would sell tickets because they were locals.
Sure.
Um, so that was the strategy. And we ended up doing that all throughout the tour. The last class I did was March 1st in LA. And as soon as
Mhm.
we got back to Arizona, everything shut down.
Shut it down.
Yeah, so that's when everything kind of stopped, that we had paid all
Mhm.
this money into the tour. We lost our biggest shows. We lost a lot of the income. And so that's when I switched over to streaming. So
Mhm.
same thing we were talking about earlier is like you got to figure out ways to be successful with whatever the current environment. So I couldn't
Mhm.
teach these group classes that were making a bunch of money. So now I got to figure something else out. So I
Mhm.
started doing my song contests, which is where I
Mhm.
would stream. It would be either $10 or $20 tickets, 40 entries, and I would review all the music, pick winners, give out some money. I ended up doing that 9 weekends in a row as a way to like bring in some money and grow the community. And
Mhm.
then when I got tired of that, I decided to start a Patreon.
Mhm.
I had seen some artists posting about it. I was like, "Hey, Oren, what do you think about this? Is something we should try?" So we tried it. I was like, people probably appreciate all the knowledge I'm putting out. It's only going to be $5 per month. I posted it, and I got
Mhm.
zero response.
Oh,
Nobody signed
really?
up. Yeah, yeah. So it's one of those lessons where it's like
Mhm.
you always got to hustle. So
Mhm.
I ended up getting up to 300 subscribers
Mhm.
within, I think, 6 months because I was messaging 100 people per day, telling them
Mhm.
about it, asking them about it, seeing if they wanted to join, following up.
I
And
know
that's
you
how I,
did that because I got one of your messages.
yeah,
And
yeah,
now I'm a Patreon. I'm one of your Patreon. I mean, I don't have the
exactly.
high level, but yeah, it
I,
all that's funny you say that, because it was so simple, man. Like I don't even remember if I saw you post about it or not. It didn't even get on my radar. And then the moment you messaged me, it just takes that personal connection. We're like, oh, this guy personally sent me a DM. Like it's for me, right?
right,
Because a post goes out to the ethos, right? And
right.
it's very impersonal sometimes. But like these direct messages, it's just hand to hand combat, bro.
Right. That's exactly what I teach everyone about everything. So no matter
Mm,
what your goal is, whether it be selling tickets for a show or getting pre-saves on your new song or even just getting people to listen to you, it's
mm,
all about having one-on-one conversations. And so
mm,
I go through these phases of like really ramped up and then I really need to rest because
mm,
I burn out because
mm,
I have to message 100, 200 people per day, whoever's liking my post, commenting on my post, watching my stories, I will send
mm,
you a message because I know you saw me today and I'm going to
mm,
ask you about this thing that I'm trying to push. Um, and that's what it takes. I had a video on Patreon about, how to sell tickets, and I showed my folder on my phone where I have 1,000 screenshots of conversations to follow up on because
mm,
if you didn't tell me no, I'm going to
mm.
follow up
I'm
with you.
coming back.
Yeah. And that's what it took to do that. I mean, that's how we sold out 50 tickets for Orange Show here in Arizona when you'd never been to Arizona before. That's what it takes. And if you're an artist, you have to do that. Every person who likes your posts, comments on your posts, watches your stories, message them, get to know them, have a real conversation, and then if you can, ask them to help you in some way.
Hmm. Bro, uh, mad respect for the hustle, man. Like
Thank
you're
you.
just a hustler. Like
Yeah.
you're a straight hustler. You're what Gary Vee would call you is probably a purebred entrepreneur. Like, just you have that itch. Like you even said, you're like, I find something, I just got to do it, right? Like I
Right.
get the itch. You get the scratch, you get the itch and you got to scratch it. Have you
Yeah.
always been that way, just like since a kid?
Yeah, so let's see. I'm kind of I always say this. I'm a 7 at everything meaning I'm a jack of all trades. I'm pretty good at kind of whatever I do, but I'm never really excellent at anything. My only thing is that I am kind of good at everything. So what I do is I
Mm-hmm.
combine those skills. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, I'm not the biggest Instagram page. I'm not the best person to have conversations with. I'm not the most successful artist manager, but when I combine everything, it makes me very effective,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm just big enough as an Instagram page. I'm just nice enough. I'm just good enough as a manager to make these connections and help people and bring them into the community.
Mm-hmm. And now you said that your parents or your parents are still in Japan?
So my dad is in Japan. My mom is in Hawaii.
Okay, got you. So you're a little bit of both. You're a mixture, huh?
Yeah. So my
Yeah.
dad is he's straight white boy farm bred Minnesota.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and my mom is Hawaiian Chinese from Hawaii.
Huh.
Yeah. And so we
Interesting.
ended
But
up
your dad, is he still serving in the military?
so he was in the army, he flew helicopters, and then when he retired, he became a golf professional teaching people how to play golf and running golf
Oh,
courses, and he got hired as a civilian over on a military base in Japan. So that's where I grew up.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Now, I'm always interested, man, because I really believe like, and I think you would agree with this. A lot of people's circumstances determine a lot of the outcomes, right, in
Mhm.
life, right? And not to say that if you start off behind, you can't catch up, right? But there is that, like you said at the beginning, you started off that way, saying like, I'm just blessed, right? Like you've been given a gift, right? Like me too. I had wonderful parents, man. I give
Mhm.
so much credit to them. But I got a lot of friends, bro, that had no parents, one
Mhm.
parent, missing parents. Like, how much do you think personally that circumstance affects outcomes like that?
I think it's about 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people with great parents who don't do shit, and then there's a lot of
That's a great
people
point.
with, no mom, no dad, no, living in apartments their whole lives, who
Mm-hmm.
end up grinding, and the struggle forces them to grow. So I will say that although I was very fortunate to be able to go to college and all that, while I was at college, I was 18 years old, living in America by myself for the very first time,
Mm-hmm.
experiencing racism for the first time. I was the Asian guy in every room for the first time.
Sure.
And I was completely alone. I was discriminated against and I was alone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that struggle that, I mean, I cried. I wanted to go home. I wanted to move to a different state, be near some friends or some family. But I've been here 10 years now by myself, essentially, with no family. Um, and it was that struggle that made me hard, like I went to college, I was by myself. I started getting really into like motivational workout videos and going to the gym every day and just toughening myself so that I could survive.
Mm-hmm.
And so that struggle, I think, is what a lot of people go through just in their normal lives, and that does force you to either rise up or succumb to it and just kind of, feel sorry for yourself. Those
Mm-hmm.
are your two options. And, which decision you make kind of determines your outcome.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well said. Are you a spiritual person at all?
A bit. So
Mm-hmm.
I go back and forth. I'm not religious. My mom's
Mm-hmm.
very Christian. But I do believe like that things are kind of are meant to be a bit,
Mm-hmm.
like I think that everything kind of happens for a reason. And I try not to stress about things that I can't control. But not too much beyond that. I got
Mm-hmm.
really into practicing the power of now.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the books that really changed my life and kind of helped me to understand myself and others better. But I'm not super spiritual beyond that.
I just wondered because sometimes I'm like, there's things that you do or say that I'm like, man, I don't know if this guy's meditating or like what he's doing over here, but he's doing something.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just because you're a kind dude and like you give out a lot of good energy. That could be it. Maybe that's it.
Right.
As far as like, because I mean, do you have a level of success, right? Like, I mean, we can't discount that. And obviously you're gonna have a lot more success in your life. I mean,
Hopefully.
oh, you will, bro. I mean, unless the sky comes crashing down, it's a foregone conclusion in my mind. But even at this point in your life, like, what are some things that you wish you knew when you started, right?
Mm.
I'm sure you could name a list. What are some of the main things you're like, man, this would have been really helpful to have known at the beginning? whether it's
Right.
like personal development or whatever.
Yeah. So honestly, that's what the Patreon is for. All
Mm,
the videos that I post there, I think I've got like 100 now. They're all on just various topics and strategies related to being successful as an artist. And they're all things that I try to teach people so that they can skip ahead,
mm,
because these are all things that took me years to learn through actually doing it and figuring it out. So I really recommend the Patreon to anyone who's listening, just because it's geared towards artists trying to get a leg up and learn things that typically take years.
mm,
Um, but let's see, if I were to go back to the beginning, there's really not a whole lot. I feel like the struggle is necessary,
mm,
like if I had told myself some things from the beginning, I don't know if I would have been as successful, because then it might have
mm.
come easier.
Interesting.
And you need the struggle. You need to fail and try to figure things out. And even with the pandemic, it's terrible. That a lot of people got sick, a lot of people died, a lot of people lost their jobs, their houses. But it is another one of those situations where you have to either figure it out or just feel sorry for yourself. And from the struggle emerged a lot of new entrepreneurs, I think.
100%. It's that idea of adaptation, right?
Right.
Adapting to situations, because life is just a series of events that you have to adapt to,
Right.
right? It's just a sequence of constant events that you're constantly having to adapt to. I As we talk, man, I like are you a Gary V follower?
I was
Uh,
in the beginning. So like
you've heard
before.
it all now though, huh?
So I mean, nothing against Gary, but a lot of it is kind of
Hmm.
repetitive,
Oh,
and
100%.
for me, I don't really need that anymore. Like it helps to see it sometimes, but and
Hmm.
I do follow him. I have notifications for his posts. But
Hmm.
back in the day, he's what got me started.
Hmm.
Because like I said,
Interesting.
I was in the cubicle, didn't want to be in a cubicle. The whole if you're living for the weekend, your shit is fucked. Like all of that really resonated with me. And so I started going to garage sales and flipping shit and
Hmm.
selling stuff. And that was really my start. And then when things kind of organically came with Oren, I still followed a lot of those principles. And like I said, I still follow him, but
Hmm.
I'm not like a hardcore fan anymore, because I kind of have that drive now, and I kind of
Right.
have an understanding of where I'm going and what I'm doing.
Hmm. It's interesting. The reason I ask is because I see a lot of him in you, like the constant content, the give,
Right.
no taking, hustle, hustle, hustle your face off, right? Like, and also for my own personal experience, I followed Gary also pretty religiously for like a year or two. And then he put out a video, I don't know if you remember it, where he basically said, look, if you have heard enough of it, like just go do it, turn me
Right.
off.
Right.
And so I've kind of, not that I've totally turned him off like you, I still tune in, but I get it now. I've
Right.
kind of fed myself the gist of it. But it's interesting. I'm gonna probably refer to you now as kind of like the Gary V of music, man. Like
I've
I
heard that
see it
before.
in you. Have you really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
dope. Okay, good. Other
Yeah. You're
people
not
are
the
seeing
first
it then.
one.
That's interesting, huh? How do you feel about that?
It feels good. I mean, obviously, I want to keep going, and I'd like to
Sure,
get to that kind of level.
sure.
I look up to him a lot, and then I also look up to Joe Rogan a lot, just
Mm,
because he's very successful in everything he does, and I have a lot of the common interests. Like I like UFC, and I like doing podcasts, and I just those are the people that I look up to, because they're very straightforward. Very
mm.
honest. They're not deceptive by any means, and yeah, like Gary said, if you heard it enough, just go
Yeah,
start doing. Like
let's
stop
do it.
listening to the motivation and go actually start working. And that's what I did. I just started working, and I've been working ever since.
Hmm. I saw this thing recently that I'm sure you can relate to. It was basically explaining the difference between motivation and discipline.
Mm, yep.
Because the point of it was, oh, there's my cat. Um, the point of it was that motivation is a feeling that can be fleeting. You
Right.
can feel motivated today and not motivated tomorrow, but the discipline is something that needs to remain the same, right?
Yeah.
Even on the days you don't feel motivated, you still got to put in the work,
Right.
because that feeling, again, if you follow your feelings all the time, you're not going to make much progress.
Right.
You have to continuously take action.
Yeah. So there's a combination. With how you feel, I feel that it is very important. So
100%.
what I do, I mean, I sleep a
Mm-hmm.
lot more now since the pandemic, especially, but I sleep, 9 to 10 hours per night, because
Oh,
I want to
wow.
feel good, and I want to I want to feel good. And the better I
Mhm.
feel, the more I do with the rest of that time. So like if I sleep
Mm.
4 to 6 hours, I'll feel okay, but I probably won't
Mhm.
get as much done as I would have in the shorter time with more sleep. And
Mm.
that's one thing that I found. But like you said, motivation, you can watch The Rock on Instagram and get motivated for 10 seconds. But if you
Right.
don't actually go to the gym, then you don't have discipline.
Right.
So for me, I think that you have to get motivated. It's good to have a feed of motivation.
Mhm.
Kind of need it every day almost. But
Mhm.
what it should lead to is a system in place that is discipline. So like,
Mm.
regardless of how motivated you are, you're going to work out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever your schedule may be. And you don't vary from it just because that's what you've decided to do. And another big thing with that, like I work out kind of a lot. I bike a
I can
lot.
tell.
Oh, thank you. I was in much better shape before I got in the music industry. I'll tell you that much.
Still
Um,
look fine, bro.
Thank you. But yeah, with that, the most important thing for me is to not think about it because
Mm.
like if I'm gonna go on, like I said, I went for a bike ride this morning. I went 22 miles. That's kind of my normal route. If I think about it for too long, I'm gonna think about all the really shitty stuff. I'm gonna think about when I'm 10 miles in and the sun's beating on me and I'm dripping sweat and I'm out of water or whatever, and I'm
Mhm.
not gonna want to go. But if I
Mhm.
just say, 3, 2, 1 and just go and don't
Mhm.
think about it, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna feel good about it. I'm gonna get it done. And that's something I read somewhere. There's some concept where it's like you say you're gonna do something, you count down from three, and then you just go do it before you
Mm.
have time to talk yourself out of it because your
Mhm.
mind wants comfort. It doesn't
Mhm.
want any discomfort. That's
Mhm.
that's the threat of death essentially to the mind. So you always have to just go before you can talk yourself out of it. And it's
Mm.
the same thing for any risk, really. I mean, like buying the house was scary, but I just did it. Building the studio, tearing it down, not knowing if it would come up and be an actual studio because
Sure.
I've never built anything before. Signing an artist when I didn't even know what a manager was, like all
Right.
these things, you just have to jump and figure it out. And if you trust
Mhm.
yourself, you will step up to whatever it is.
Mm.
You have to give yourself the opportunity to do that.
Well said. Giving yourself the opportunity. I like that you said that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we limit ourselves, right? Because I
Right.
think most people have a lot of potential. Like I
Oh yeah.
believe in humanity. Like what do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think most people can do way more than they think they can. And the mind is a very limiting factor.
Mm.
And a lot of it is upbringing too. Some people's parents ingrain in them really negative ideas and like, you can't do anything, you're not going to be shit. Your teachers say that or whatever. And some of us have parents who are like, you can do anything. And I think
Mhm.
both are kind of toxic, but
Mhm. For
everyone
sure.
has the potential to do much more than they're capable of. And the clearest sign of that is in athletics. So like if you put
Mm.
someone who's kind of lazy and doesn't do anything and you throw them into, wrestling or football or something, they're going to do much more than they thought they could, like through the practices, through the running. You're like, "Oh my god, I can't run 8 miles." And then they end up doing it because they have to.
Mhm.
And it's the same with
Mm.
anything. I can't work that hard. I can't accomplish this. But if you set up the system to where you have to, you're gonna do it.
You sound very systems oriented. I've heard you say that several
Oh,
times.
yeah,
Set up
that's
a system, have a system.
that's a big thing for me. So
Mhm.
like when I do consultations with artists, I don't like signing artists because it's a very personal relationship. I only managed
Mhm.
3 artists over the last 4 years, and I'm
Mhm.
very close with all of them. I take it very personally. But when I do consultations, it's to try and give some of my management advice for a very short period of time to someone. And what I always do is I try and get all the facts because I studied engineering in college. So I'm like an
Mhm.
engineer mindset, very systems oriented, numbers oriented. And so I ask them, what are you doing now? What works? What do you want? And then we try and set up systems to accomplish that.
Mhm.
So like let's say with the podcast that I'm doing now. I
Mhm.
started recently just because I was interviewing people for Patreon information to find out information from people who know much more than me and share it with the community. And I decided just to turn it into a full on podcast. So, with that, I had to come up with a system to make sure that I could be consistent with it. So, I
Mhm.
have several stored up, ready to go. I have them all uploaded. I have them all edited. They're
Mhm.
ready to release, already scheduled. Same with the Patreon. There are points where I have 4 months of posts scheduled. in advance, to where if I get sick for a month or if I go on vacation, I don't fail because
Mhm.
that system is in place. And I think that's important because success typically is not random. And if it is
Mm.
the one off, if you want consistent success, there has to be a system in place behind it.
Hmm. I like what you said right there. Success is not random.
Right.
I think you're a testament to that. I mean, look at yourself. Like
Thank
this
you.
is not a random luck of the draw thing. Uh, Talk more about the podcast real quick. I'm interested. I've seen it. I've seen a few clips from it. I haven't tuned in,
Yeah.
but I am going to tune in now. I'm very interested.
Wow.
What's the name of it? What are you doing? Like,
Yeah, so it's called the NTM podcast, just because I didn't
mhm,
want to say Nick the Manager on it.
fair enough.
But NTM podcast, it's available on all platforms. I think I'm on episode, or I guess they're called episode
Mhm,
21 right now.
mhm,
But essentially I just started reaching out to people that I had met throughout my journey. So like
mhm,
with Rap House, going back to the Gary V stuff and giving value,
mhm,
the Rap House was cool because I have pictures with Mark Battles and Jack Harlow, and Jack Harlow's giving me a hug saying I'm a good guy, like all
mhm,
those things are really cool. But what no one sees was the year of building the studio, the
mhm,
year of every paycheck going into the studio, and then even with everyone visiting, what that meant for me was I'm doing sheets and towels and laundry for 12 beds. I'm cleaning the
mhm,
whole house.
mhm.
I'm going to the show and working the merch table. I'm coming back with them. I'm cooking for them. I'm cleaning the next day. I'm staying up till 4 a.m. Then I'm going to work the next day. Like all of it was just giving value for free because that's what I had to do in order to make it happen.
And
Um,
so you weren't charging any money. You were just
so
bringing them in for free.
there were a few people I charged, but it was only after the first night. So it was like
Okay.
I'm offering a complimentary night. You can stay here. I, but yeah, it was essentially just manual labor. Doing
Good
all the
Lord.
laundry every day, going to work the next day, tired as shit. Just whatever you had to
Sure.
do. And then so with the podcast, a lot of the guests are people that I met during the Rap House times. So
Hmm.
um just people that I've met, so like Kayvon, the A&R genius, he does the interviews and schedules the guests there. He was my first like main guest. I've
Mhm.
had artists like Ryan Oakes and Abstract, who have hundreds of millions of streams. Greaves is on there, another fascinating guy, has been touring for 15 years.
Right.
And Whitney Payton, she was the special guest at Cato's event.
Yeah, I
So
just saw you had her recently, right?
yeah, so every
She's
time
dope, man.
I
I
meet
saw her
someone.
years ago.
You did?
She's been consistent. I saw her in
Yeah.
Fort Collins, Colorado in like 2013.
Yeah.
That
She's
girl's been consistent.
she's crazy. She's toured with everyone for years, and that's why I wanted to talk to her, is because
Hmm.
a lot of people don't understand that touring is not glamorous. Same thing with the Rap House.
Hmm.
All you
Hmm.
see is the picture they post in front of the crowd, like, yeah, and
Yeah.
then behind the scenes, they're struggling physically and emotionally to try and make it all work,
Hmm.
sleeping on the floor, crowded in one bedroom. It's a rough life.
Hmm.
And that's why I wanted to talk to her. But yeah, the podcast is just talking to people who have done things that I'm impressed by,
Hmm.
talking to people who have either had streaming success, or, we had Damian Ritter, who's the manager of Futuristic, and Dizzy Wright and
Yeah.
Hobson. Just all these people who've done things that I aspire to do one day,
Hmm.
basically.
That's dope, man. And you're just getting going. Like, how long ago did you start? A couple months ago?
Something like that. I don't even know.
Mhm.
Yeah, not very long ago.
Good for you, man. I think podcasting is huge, and I think it's only going to grow. Right?
Absolutely.
I think it's not an untapped market, but I don't think it's at full scale. Is I guess what I would say about
Right.
podcasting.
Especially with the niche markets, like
Hmm.
there's so many topics that people are interested in. I mean, you can make a podcast about something totally random and you'll find 1,000 people who want to listen to it.
Sure.
And with me, it just made sense because I already make content for artists who are trying to learn
Hmm.
about the industry. And so if
Hmm.
I can have firsthand, uh, long form conversations with people who they've heard of or they look up to or they listen to, I
Hmm.
think that's really cool.
Oh, it's dope. Now, before we go, can you talk a little bit about Oren and kind of like where he's at and what that looks like, some successes, failures, like, and where you guys are kind of headed?
Yeah, so So when we started working together, we really figured out that the blueprint to quick financial success
Mm,
without connections and without overhead was the streaming.
mm,
So Spotify was our primary goal from the beginning because we
mm,
saw that initial success. So at this point, he has over 11 million streams. But back in 2019, after 2 years essentially of, you know, several million streams per year, we
mm,
decided we needed to convert that into a physical fan base. So
mm,
that's one of the struggles that a lot of people have, is that they don't recognize they're two different things. So like
mm.
even though someone listens to you on Spotify, does that mean they're going to come to your show if you go on tour? And with touring, you have to have that physical fan base. And
Sure.
with that being said, Whitney was the opposite. We just talked about the other
Mm,
day. She had a physical fan base, but now she's
mm,
trying to get the streaming up because
mm,
she needs to convert over there. So for us, we stopped focusing on playlists and streaming markets and all that. We started thinking like, how do we get people to come to shows?
mm,
So he started doing a bunch of shows in Atlanta. He ended up headlining his first show at the Masquerade, which is like a 500 or 600 cap. And we that was a really cool event because we had built up the relationship with the manager there to where he got booked for a headline show, and we picked all of our friends to be the opening lineup. So in the back in the
Smart.
green room, it was just all of us hanging out and kicking it. And then everyone did their thing, and it was a great experience. Everyone at the show was our fans. They all had our
Huh,
merch on. It was really dope. And so after that, we decided to keep it going.
huh,
So one of the next things for us was a show in Hawaii. So,
huh,
like I said, my mom's over there, a bunch of my family's over there, and I try to go every year for July 4th just because I get that week off from work. And so I usually go there. And what I saw in 2019 was that Greaves was having a show. And
mm,
Greaves, I had just met because he stayed in my house twice. And I
mhm,
was like, dude, you got a show out there? What if Oren opens? We can get him out there. And he's like, yeah, let's
huh.
do it. And so I booked
Easy.
Oren's flight, get out there, and he's doing a show in Hawaii, a place he never
Oh,
thought he'd ever go.
sure.
And it was crazy. And so we kept that momentum going. As soon as we got back from Hawaii, we started planning a tour. It was literally just like we're having a couple drinks, and I was like, what if we do a tour? And so we got on Google Maps. We said, what are 4-hour drives like? And so we just kind of picked cities based on that. And then we plotted it out. He booked all the shows himself essentially. And then we went on tour. And so that was how we were going to build up that physical fan base. And then with
Mhm,
me growing as Nick the manager and doing the classes, it was a perfect fit. We were taking the same car, we were staying in the same places, but what I was doing was helping what he was doing. And
mhm,
then that was the plan. So
mhm,
unfortunately, when the pandemic came, we lost a lot of that momentum. We weren't focusing on streams, so the streams weren't that high. There's not much income, um, and he couldn't do any of the stuff that he would normally do as an artist. So I started focusing on, what can I do? And
mhm,
so I did the contests, I did the Patreon. That stuff was working, so that's what I invested my time in.
mhm,
And he was just kind of figuring himself out. He was doing a lot of like getting in shape and focusing on mental health and all that kind of stuff. And so that's when we started to grow apart during the pandemic,
mhm,
because we didn't get to see each other for the first time in a long time. And then the communication kind of broke down a little bit because I was focusing on my stuff. And then, of
mhm,
course, there's the discrepancy in that, what I was doing was really working and becoming successful. He didn't
mhm,
really have a lot going on because there was a lot of
mhm,
stuff he couldn't do when our
mhm.
whole focus was touring and all the touring was canceled.
Sure.
So now that things are starting to open up, I think that's definitely the next step. We still have the
Mm.
tour vehicle, and I'm a little bit bigger now, so I can probably do more of my classes. And then with the Netflix placement,
Yeah, talk about that. That's dope, man.
yeah, so that was one of those things that actually brought us back together. Was we had a heart to heart after that, and we kind of talked about our feelings and reconnected. But that Netflix placement, I was looking back at the emails. I sent the email to the sync company for that song in June of 2019. So it took almost 2 years for it to finally get placed anywhere.
Uh,
Um, and once it did, it was so beautiful and it was so surreal, turning on Netflix on my in my living room, seeing my third option be Love, Death and Robots, hitting play, and within 30 seconds I hear Oren's voice.
That's
And it was
crazy, huh?
it was so surreal. And then so all this stuff started happening.
Hmm.
And for me, it gave me something to manage because
Hmm.
managers, it's hard to make things happen, but it's
Hmm.
much easier to capitalize on existing things. So
Hmm.
with that placement, I got right to work. I found
Uh-huh.
every playlist that was based on Love, Death, and Robots, messaged all of them, trying to get him on those playlists. We send out tons of blog blasts. We got him, all kinds of different things going. We did Spotify marquee ads, sent around Google Forms to everyone commenting on the YouTube video, just really trying to capitalize on it. And so it gave me
Hmm.
something to manage and it reinvigorated me as a manager, really, because I wanted to help him and this was something I could help with.
Hmm.
So we're probably going to keep going off that success for a little bit and then start planning the next steps. But I really think that shows are going to be the next thing. And that, with that, physical fans, that physical connection is the best way to really be successful as an artist.
Hmm.
So I'm grateful that things are going to start opening up for that.
I think we're there. I mean, we're not fully there, but I think we're
Yeah,
almost we're headed in that trajectory, right? There's
definitely.
different states opening up, and so, anyways, man, congrats on the success of Oren,
Thank you.
but huge kudos to you, man. Like you said, you're behind the scenes grinding and hustling and putting in a lot of work, not just
Yeah.
for yourself, but for somebody else. And so, respect. I nod my identical hat to you.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, anyways, man, is there anything like any like last tidbits of wisdom? I know you have probably tons of stuff you could share, but like one last thing that you'd like to leave people with?
Let's see. Yeah, I mean the main concept, right, is I am very lucky, but I also work very hard when I do get opportunities. So the
Mm.
main thing is just to try things that excite you.
Mm.
For me, I get really fired up about certain things. So like when we get a song on a big playlist, that really excites me. When I booked his show here in Arizona when he'd never been to Arizona, that really made me feel like a manager. And then I was able to sell the 50 tickets that we had to sell to secure that slot. And
Mm.
then everything that I do, it's it's capitalizing on opportunity and giving myself that chance to step up. So I really, really, really encourage artists and any type of entrepreneur to try whatever excites you, even if you
Mm.
think it might be outside the realm of your capability. Because if you try something, you at least have the chance to step up and figure out if that is a part of you or not. Um, and there's no way around that as in terms of getting experience. So like for me right now, I'm a much better manager than I've ever been before because of everything that I've done and because of everything that I am doing. So like I have some experience in making music as an artist, in tracking as an engineer, in mixing as an engineer, in booking studio time, in booking shows, in hosting people. I've done all kinds of different things, and all of those add to my arsenal, my tools.
Sure.
And like with the Patreon, like I said, it is based on me, but as a manager, it gives me a community to plan a tour with. So like the
Hmm.
next time we go do shows, I have 250 people all across the United States who I can say, where are you guys? What are your venues? What can you book? Do you want to open? And now we have this whole network to help us. Whereas the first tour, we had nothing.
Hmm.
So it's just because I tried things. And like I said, the Patreon, nobody fucking signed up. I had to hustle for that. So that being
What?
said, don't just try things, but really try things. Like try to follow through. Don't
Mhm.
say I tried it for a day, it didn't work, and then give up. You know,
Right.
actually give it a real try, and then you'll figure out, if it does work.
Hmm.
You have to like really try.
Persistence, right?
Yeah.
That's just it. Like, you just persisted.
Yeah.
You went from zero to persistence to then results, right?
Yep.
Because a lot of people I think stop at the resistance part, right? There's failure or resistance, and
Mhm.
that's when there's a lot of people that stop. Whereas you have shown that persistence, you can break through that barrier of resistance and create
Well,
opportunity.
yes, I mean, with the Patreon, like I said, I follow up with everyone multiple times until they tell me no. But it was the same with Rap House. Like when I was getting people in here, I think it took me 12 emails to get Mark Battles here, 12
Really.
unresponded to emails before I
Uh-huh.
finally got a yes. And
Good.
That's all it is. It's following up. And I found 11 different ways to say, just following back, just circling around, just checking in,
Right.
just to try and keep being persistent without
Right.
being negative. And that's
Right.
really important too. A lot of people, if they
Mm.
don't get an answer right away, they follow up like, hey, what the fuck, man? They
Hmm.
take it personally. You can't
Right.
take anything personally when you're being persistent.
Right. And understand you're right, like that not everybody, maybe not everybody checked their email that day,
Right.
or maybe they're just really busy. It's I think it goes back, and Gary would say, empathy, right? Being
Mhm.
empathetic to like what I want is not necessarily what fits into everybody else's worldview, right? Or their
Right.
time structure. I can't just be like, well, why aren't you giving to me?
Yeah.
Right? Like, well, have you given enough yet? Have you given
Yeah.
enough to receive yet?
The most important thing to understand beyond just not taking things personally is that when you reach out to someone, they don't owe you shit, nothing.
Right.
The
Mm,
fact that they even give you the 10 seconds to read your message is something you should be appreciative of, no matter
mm.
who they are or who you are.
Well
And I
said.
take that to heart. So
Well, look, man, where can we find you? Like, where can anybody find you? Where's the Patreon, the YouTube, the Twitch, all of it?
yeah, so let's see. So I'm on Instagram as at Nick the Manager. And then I'm on Patreon also as Nick the Manager. The subscription starts at only $7 per month. If you do want to sign up, usually I'll cover the first month for you just so you have a free trial and you can decide if you like it. But it's got,
Mm,
I think, over 100 videos of information on all various topics. And then of course the access to the community where there's tons of artists. And then on Twitch, I stream every Saturday now. I'm sponsored by Mackie. And so we do giveaways once a month of like full studio bundles. And I do free song reviews. So every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, it's twitch.tv/Nick the Manager.
mm,
And then the podcast is on Spotify as NTM Podcast.
mm. Got it. Well, guys, go follow Nick the Manager. Go get his Patreon. I'm telling you that when he originally launched, it was $5, and it's more than paid for itself. It's ridiculous. If you are an artist of any type, you need to go follow his Patreon. You have $5 to $10. You
Right.
all have $5 to $10. Invest in yourself. Invest in yourself. Nick, thanks for who you are, man. Like you are just you're a bright light, dude. Like that's how I describe you.
Thank you.
It's encouraging again to see somebody who really is passionate but also cares about people. And I just wanted to affirm that in you, man. You have some gifts, and not just the hustle and the grind, but like you have some emotional gifts that I think I know a lot of people are benefiting from, man. So
Yeah.
keep up what you're doing, man. You're making a difference, and you're not just helping people become artists. I truly think you're helping people become better people.
That's my
I
goal.
really think you are.
Yeah.
I think you're doing it, man. Well, thanks for your time, bro. You're a
Yeah.
busy guy, so I'm gonna let you go. But thanks for your time, man. I really
Thank you so
appreciate
much for
you.
having me. This was a great conversation. And I definitely talked about a lot of things that I've never talked about before. So that was
Good.
awesome.
I appreciate you, man. All
All
right,
right.
bro. Well, we'll talk to you soon, man.
All right. Peace out.
All right. Later, brother.